Greetings everyone, and welcome back to RP Genesis, where characters are more than numbers. If you've been following us on Blue Sky recently, you'll notice that I've posted a fair amount of pictures of a model that I've been painting. It's one of the villains from my homebrew campaign, and I haven't really painted models for a long time. My friend Scorp-Gaming was teaching me to paint. Unfortunately, circumstances changed and he's not able to do it so much anymore. So I want to try and paint things in my own style now. And when I say my own style, I mean stuff similar to what you've seen in my drawings. It's going to be an interesting project, but it's one I'm very willing to explore. Now, what you saw from the Jester, if you have seen it at all, is that it was more of a experimental piece. It's flat colours with black on top where I've cross-hatched and tried to go over some of the darkest tones in just pure black. But now it's time for experiment number 2, and that's where this guy comes in. So this is a hill giant model, and with it being much bigger than the Jester, I think it will be a good place to go next to make sure that I can get the cross-hatching down, as in like the technique, so I'll be able to do it a lot more accurately when I move on to smaller models, but also the results will be a lot easier to see as well, especially on camera with limited technology. It's going to be very interesting to see how this turns out, and I'm hoping it turns out quite well, even if it doesn't turn out fantastic. So, let's get started. And I hope you will join me on this journey and offer your critiques as well as your advice down below. I am not a good mini painter, but I do want to get better, so this is where it starts. Maybe you'll join this journey to get better along with me. Who knows? First off, I want to give a huge thank you to Red Wizard for not only allowing me to use the shop as a studio to record my progress, but also priming the model in the first place. So the first things first when it comes to Gub is that he needs to be primed. Why? Well, this will make any paint that is applied to the model brighter, darker depending on the colour you go for, but it will also allow the paint to fall onto the model a lot cleaner too. Colour scheme I'm wanting to go for is to make him look like he spends a lot of time in the sun. So a tanned-esque looking skin colour was what I was wanting to go for, and then the cloth he wears will be a mixture of 2 to 3 different colours to make him stand out. The Wizard of the Coast model uses very little in terms of palette variation, a lot of browns and, well, other browns. And it works if the giant is just a no-name NPC that your players are just there to fight and kill. But I want Gub to be a giant of infamy, so he needs something to emphasize that, and I can do that visually by giving him maybe some sort of striking color, or maybe some sort of fabric that is very clearly a flag of the kingdom or part of royalty, or something that he's stolen and should be in a lot of trouble for stealing, but that stuff is for another day. Right now, I want to get the skin sorted, so I have to choose my first paint as a starting point and see if it's what I'm looking for. So the brand of paint I'm going to be using is Duncan Road's Too Thin Coats, and my starting point is going to be Kronos Flesh. When I began putting it on, it started looking too dark for what I was wanting, but model paint will change tone slightly once it dries. But even if it is still too dark by the time it dries, I can use it as a darker tone as I apply the more desired tone, let's say, on top of this one. Right now, I don't need to be neat when I'm applying these colours, so the paint is just being slapped on to try and cover as much skin as I can see, and then the excess I do have, I then thin down with water and use it to begin fleshing out the mud under his feet. Then I begin to do some premature experimenting. Using White Star, I add a few drops to the Kronos Flesh and paint some bright patches on Gub's arm to set myself another starting point to compare future attempts to. Making use of the excess paint once again, I then thin it out with a little bit more water and use a dry brush to start painting some lighter tones on the mud, which actually turned out quite nice. However, the skin is a slightly different story. Some patches of it are still too thin so I can see the underlayer, but that's not a huge problem. When I go to start painting the darker tones or the lighter tones, they'll cover those and you never know they were there in the first place. So it's been a few days after I have painted him because I've only just been able to get around to recording this part, and I think overall the skin is looking okay. This is the kind of tone I want to go for something that spends a lot of time in the sun, but the colour I've gone for the light bits I think has failed quite badly. It's very bright, as if an intense light is shining on him rather than natural light, So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get back to just this default skin color and paint over it again. And then I'm going to use the white in small amounts to slowly brighten it up, paint different strips on his shoulder or his arm or wherever, and then in increasing brightness, and then see which one I prefer after they've dried, because when the paint goes on wet it looks one color, but then when it dries it will look completely different. Like, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it on this video compared to the one on my camera phone, but this has dimmed, for lack of a better term. It's dimmed and settled, whereas when the paint was going on it was still a bit dark. So I think the next step for painting Gub here is to get rid of the light tone and get all of the base colors down for his trousers and his strap and the bag and everything like that. And then once that is done, use one of his arms as the testing palette again for slowly increasing light tones as well as dark tones, and see what I'm going to prefer doing. And that we will cover in the next video. So I hope you'll join me for that. Thanks for watching, everyone. Much love and appreciation to you all as always, and I'll see you in the next one.